bit busy, but we can always share some ditties. It's just a cup in time. This song doesn't have to rhyme. Life's all of us, not every moment we can be feeling fine. I wanna share a moment, just a second if you will, maybe even a cup of thrill. We could share this performance. It's tea time, come sit with me.
Well, welcome guys. Miss Liz is here. Yes, we had some technical glitches, but we pulled it off and we are here. So I have a returning guest from season 4. Terry Tucker is here, and we're going to talk about his new book, 4 Truths and a Lie. That's right. We're going to talk about something deep. I really enjoyed reading this book and getting a chance to read it. So thanks, Terry, for that. I enjoyed it. I learned a lot about it as well. And we're going to go deep into that book. So today's tea time is based on resilience through connection. No, that's the wrong tea. Miss Liz, boom, boom, boom. Back it up. Back it up. Wrong guess. Today's tea is purposely seeking wisdom. The next tea is coming at 7 p.m. Miss Liz has got a lot of glitches today, I see. But before we get started, we're going to get everybody over to Miss Liz's YouTube channel, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, Facebook, LinkedIn. You know all those good platforms. Give it a like, subscribe, follow, and get these tea times out, because each tea time does make a difference for my guest and for my listening audience. There is somebody out there that might need this tea time today. So let's share them out and let's get them out. So let's get started with disclaimer and an intro, and then we'll get Terry in here and we'll spill some tea. And we're going to spill his tea of purposely seeking wisdom. That's the tea we're serving today. Disclaimer for Miss Liz's Tea Time live show. Miss Liz's Tea Time is a global platform dedicated to sharing real-life stories, diverse perspectives, and meaningful conversations that inspire awareness, healing, and connection. Miss Liz is going live using StreamYard. Before leaving a comment during the live broadcast, please grant StreamYard permission to display your name at StreamYard.com. Please be advised that all the content brought forward during any Tea Time show is presented in good faith. However, discussions may include opinions, beliefs, and perspectives that do not necessarily represent the views of Miss Liz or the Tea Time platform. Information shared by guests is based on their own experiences and is perceived to be accurate at the given time of airing. All guest viewers and participants are responsible for using their own judgment when considering any action or decisions that may relate to these discussions. Some episodes may cover sensitive topics, including but not limited to trauma, abuse, grief, mental health, and other emotionally triggering subjects. Listeners' and viewers' discretion is strongly advised. Tea Time with Miss Liz is an open discussion forum designed to offer insight, inspire awareness, and create connection. It is not a substitute for professional, medical, legal, or therapeutical advice. If you require professional support, please seek assistance from qualified professionals or trusted resources in your area. If you have any questions regarding the disclaimer or the content of this discussion, you are welcome to contact me, aka Miss Liz, directly at my email at bookingmissliz@gmail.com or visit my link tree at Miss Liz's Tea Time. By choosing to participate in, comment on, or view these live shows, you acknowledge and accept this disclaimer. Your participation is entirely voluntary. Miss Liz, welcomes you to join the conversation with an open heart, and if at any time you feel this platform is not right for you, I respect that decision and welcome you back whenever you're ready. Tea Time with Miss Liz is serving truth and awareness 1 cup at a time. Well, welcome everyone to another Tea Time with Miss Liz, where transformation is poured one real story at a time. Today, I'm honored to welcome back a powerful returning guest, Terry Tucker, author, motivational speaker, and creator of Motivational Check. Terry's story is one of the unshaken faith, resilience, and purpose. A former college basketball player, SWAT negotiator, and cancer warrior, he lived through life's toughest battles and continued to lead with courage and grace. His message reminds us that adversity doesn't weaken us. It reveals a strength that was already there. Terry's mission is to help others live a life built on purpose, perseverance, and passion. So grab your cup and join me as we dive into another inspiring tea time with Terry Tucker, a man who doesn't just talk about toughness, but lives it every single day. So let me get Terry in here and let's spill some tea together. Welcome, Terry.
Hey, Liz, thanks for having me back. I'm looking forward to this.
Right? It's been a few years.
Yes, it has, but we've stayed connected, so this is great.
I love it when my guests stay connected because then I get to check out what you guys are doing, right? I'm that little bug on the wall. So, Terry, let's start off for some of the viewers and listeners who haven't seen your other tea time, and I encourage them to check that out in season 4. Tell us who Terry was as a little guy and who Terry is now.
Yeah, as a little guy, I don't think I was ever a little guy. I'm 6'8", about 230 pounds. So I don't
You're a
think
long baby too, right?
I was. I was. I mean, it's funny. I'm 6'8". I've got a brother 6'7", a brother 6'6", and my dad was 6'5". So we used to joke, if you sat behind our family in church growing up, not a prayer's chance you were going to see anything that was going on. But our
Yes, at church.
mother was the boss. It didn't matter how big, tall, strong we were, whatever mom said, that's the way it went. And my mother's 90 years old, still with us. And it's still that way today. So I've had a great life. I've got a great group of family with my brothers and my mom, and also with my wife and daughter and her husband and that. So yeah, I mean, my life is what I call the three F's: faith, family, and friends. Have really what's gotten me through my life so far.
I like that. Faith, family, and friends. Something we don't really talk about, right? And today is World Kindness Day, so it's nice to have you back as a friend.
Thank you.
So let's get into your tea, and then we're going to get into your book, Terry. So your tea is purposely seeking wisdom. Why did you give me those 3 words?
Because that's always been me. I'm a curious kind of person. I always, want to know why, how, what makes people tick. The books I read are predominantly biographies and autobiographies. I want to know why people make decisions, what they're thinking, their process and things like that, because I think I can learn from that. What am I thinking on a particular project or a cancer treatment or something like that? It's not just carte blanche, like, sure, whatever somebody tells me they want to do, that's what we're going to do. I've always been, I want to know why. Doctor, if you're going to do this, what are you trying to get out of it? What's the end game with this? And I need to be able to understand it. Don't medicalese me with, a bunch of big words that I don't understand, because if that's the case, I'll probably say no. But if you can explain it to me and help me to understand it, there's a much greater chance that I will say yes, because I know what the outcome, I know what we're trying to get out of doing this. Whether we get it or not is a lot of times happenstance, but I want to know what we're going to get out of it. I just don't want to do it because, well, that's the protocol or that's the standard of care. That doesn't work for me. I need to know why we're going to do this.
I like that. We need to know the whys, right? Not just follow the lead. Being a SWOT negotiator in your past, Terry, you learned a lot of that, right? Why did those offenders do what they did? And you kind of had to talk them into getting to understand the story behind why you were in that situation.
Yeah. And it's funny, I use the word why. We never asked people why. We stayed away from why questions. Because think about when you were growing up, you did something wrong. What was the first thing your mom or dad said? Why did you do that? So why questions sound accusatory. It's like,
Yeah.
oh, wait a minute. It's like, hey, Liz, why did you wear that top today? Oh, wait a minute. Does Terry not like what I'm wearing? No, I can get this.
I'm wearing blue because you like blue.
I love blue. Yeah, it's my favorite color. But it's just one of those things where you ask how or why question. Hey, Liz, what made you decide to wear that today? It's a softer question. It lands differently with somebody than why did you do that? So we stayed away from why questions and just use how and what questions because they land differently with somebody. So, you want people to believe in you. You want people to feel that you're giving them a straight shot. So when we would start negotiating with somebody, it wouldn't be like, hi, I'm Officer Tucker. It would be, hi, I'm Terry. What's your name? And a lot of times you don't need to know my name. Okay, that's fine. What do you want me to call you? And one of the big things we did is we never lied to somebody. We never, and we always used to tell people, if you feel I'm lying to you, if you feel I'm not being honest with you, I want you to say, hey, time out. I think you're lying to me. And it's like, okay, let's talk about that. And the reason we never lied to people, and this happened quite often, is that a year from now, 2 years from now, 3 years from now, we would be right back negotiating with this same person. For example, say it was their mom that set them off. They got in a big argument with their mom. They barricaded themselves in a room with a gun. Well, mom's still alive and mom's still pushing their buttons. So 3 years from now, we're back negotiating with this individual again. And if they felt, hey, Terry, the last time we negotiated, you lied to me, I've lost all credibility. We're going to have to bring another negotiator in and we're going to have to start from zero. As opposed to, if you felt I was honest with you, we're much farther down the path of being able to get you out safely, which is hopefully what's going to happen, because the person feels that you're honest with them. So we just never lied with people. People would say to us all the time, hey, I'll put the gun down, I'll come out, but you got to promise me I'm not going to go to jail. And we would have to say something like, really? We've been negotiating for 4 hours and now you want me to start lying to you? Or we would say, hey, when you come out, you are going to go to jail. And then we try to deflect the conversation to something that was more palatable to them and stuff like that. So we never lied, even for things that, people would be like, I want a helicopter. And you'd be like, a helicopter? How am I supposed to get you a helicopter? Things like that. It's like, what do you think I am, the FAA or something like that? No, I'm just a cop. I can't get you a helicopter. Let's be realistic about what we're trying to do here and things like that. So yeah, there were a lot of nuances with it.
I kind of like where this conversation is going, because your new book is called 4 Truths and a Lie. And we're talking about a lie, right? So you kind of all full circle. What I really liked about it was the 4 truths. And then I like the lie at the end of your book. I like the way that you did the book, Terry. So what brought you to do this book?
Yeah, so back in 2020, I wrote my first book, and it's called Sustainable Excellence. And it's a book about how I thought people could be successful. And as soon as I published it, I always kind of felt that there was another book, that there was something else that I wanted to write about. And in right around, actually this time, it was right around Thanksgiving of 2023, I started writing 4 Truths and a Lie. The first book took me about 6 months to write. I did it after I had my leg amputated while I was healing. But Sustainable Excellence was about success. 4 Truths and a Lie is about another word that begins with S, and that word is significance. Success is what we do for ourselves. It's what we do to get to where we want to be. Significance is how we benefit other people, how we get into their lives and help them. And so there were always these sort of 2 books sitting there. One was pretty quick in writing. The other one took me almost 2 years to write and finally come to publish. But I was also in the middle of cancer treatment and things like that. So it would be, 2 weeks working on the book and then a week off to have treatment. And so there was this sort of, I always call it fits and starts. You're starting and then, now I got to stop, and things like that. So, it took a lot longer. It was a lot more research based. 4 Truths and a Lie was a lot more research based, because you see things on the internet, you see things on social media, and you take them as gospel. Like, so and so said this. There was a quote, and I used to quote it all the time on podcasts from Nelson Mandela. Oh shoot, and it just went right out of my head. But it was about, I never lose. I either win or I learn. And I used to quote him all the time. And when I started to research the book, it was like, he never said that. There's nowhere, anywhere that says that he said that. But there are people out there on the internet saying that he said that. So, when you're writing a book, you've got to be kind of careful that, well, this person said that. Well, no, he didn't say that. Yeah, you can say, it's attributed to him, or, you can find it. But to say that he said it and then to do your research and find out he never said it, it kind of made me slow down a little bit and say, well, some of these things you're quoting on the internet, or on these podcasts, you better make sure they're right. You better make sure they're accurate And if they're not, you better say, well, it's attributed to him, but I couldn't find anywhere where he actually said that. So,
Well, I want to get into the four truths. So the first truth that you have in the book is called control your mind or it will control you. Why is that the first truth?
I had these four truths, and when I first had them, first of all, I had three. And then I kept thinking there's this fourth one out there. And the fourth one, it'll actually end up being number three when we get to it. But I used to say they were all equal, that they were all equally as important. And the more I researched, the more I read, the more I talked to other people, I kind of felt, no, they're not. That control your mind or your mind will control you is the most important truth of the four that I have laid out. I think they're all important, but the most important one is control your mind. If you can't control your mind is going to control you. Your mind is we always think, well, it's my mind, so it's got my best interest in mind. It doesn't. It doesn't have your best interest in mind. Your mind is your mammalian brain. It wants to keep you safe. So, Liz, if you got up this morning and said, all right, I'm going to go skydiving, your brain would immediately,
Not happening.
well, yeah, I mean, something like that. Your mind would immediately kick into, oh, wait a minute, Liz, the plane could crash or your parachute could not, there's all kinds, it doesn't go to the positive. It doesn't go to the, yeah, that's great. You should do that because it'll make you a stronger person. No, it goes to keeping you safe. Don't do that, Liz, because all these things could happen to you. And when you understand that, you've got to be the one to control your brain, because we all know the only way you're going to grow, the only way you're going to improve, the only way you're going to get better is if you do things that make you uncomfortable. And if making, getting up in a plane and jumping out of it with a parachute makes you uncomfortable, that's a mechanism for growth for you in some way. And I use that kind of as an extreme, but anything you want to do in your life, that's scary. I don't know if I can do that. I always tell, especially young people, it's like if there's something in your heart, something in your soul that you believe you're supposed to do, but it scares you, go ahead and do it. Because at the end of your life, the things you're going to regret are not going to be the things you did. They're going to be those things you didn't do. And by then it's going to be too late to go back and do them.
Well, this podcast scares the heck out of me. That's why I'm doing it, Terry.
Exactly.
Meeting
but you
people
grow
is
every
scary.
time you interview somebody. You get smarter, you get better. And even though it scares you, I mean, I think about when we first did this, how many years ago, and where you are now. And I can just watching you, listening to some of the podcasts that you've done recently, you've grown so much since you and I did ours years ago. So you're getting better as a human being, one podcast at a time.
It still scares the shit out of me, though.
That's good. That means you're still growing. That means, there's still room for growth in you.
Right? Well, I think what scares me is the guests that are coming to tea, coming at the door and knocking and saying, hey, I want to have tea with you. So it's scary, right? It's like that jumping out of the airplane. You just never know what's coming for you. So
no, you don't. But I mean, think about all the people you've interviewed and think how much you've learned just from those hour-long segments. 1 hour of your day, or 2 hours if you're doing two of them, in one day. You're that much smarter. You're that much better. You've grown as a human being just for 2 hours a day. You got 22 other hours in the day that you can do whatever you want to do after that.
Upload, create.
Exactly. Do all the fun stuff that goes along with making this. Yeah.
Let's get into number two. The number two is embrace the pain and discomfort and use it to make you stronger and more resilient. Why is that number two, Terry?
That's number two because, and I look at it this way. We don't like pain. We don't like to do things that make us uncomfortable. And I kind of already have alluded to this. But the only way you grow, the only way you get better is if you step outside your comfort zones and you do things that make you uncomfortable. And I will recommend this to your audience because I do this every day of my life. Every day of your life, do one thing that scares you, that makes you nervous, that makes you uncomfortable, that's potentially embarrassing. It doesn't have to be a big thing. But if you do those small things every day, when the big disasters in life hit us, and they hit all of us. We lose somebody who's close to us. We unexpectedly get let go from our job. Like me, you find out you have a chronic or a terminal illness. You will be so much more resilient to handle those things than people who never step outside their comfort zone. And we know these people. We know these people that play it close to the vest. They never want to do anything that's uncomfortable, anything that might get outside that. Oh, I don't know. Like you say, I'm nervous every time I do a podcast. That's good. That shows growth.
Yeah.
As opposed to the person who, just sits around all day and never does anything, never, we always hear about the 34-year-old guys that are, living in their parents' basement and stuff like that. You don't want to be one of those people. You want to do things that make you potentially fail. And I wish I would have known this when I was a kid. This is from a guy by the name of Jeff Wetzler. And I don't know about you, Liz, but when I was growing up, you would put these arbitrary mileposts out there. Something like, and I'm just making this up. By the time I'm 28 years old, I want to be making $100,000 a year. Or by the time I'm 34, I want to be married and have a kid, or at least be in a serious relationship. And you just put them out there, and you pick an age and you put it out there. And then when you get to those mileposts and you're not where you are, now you're looking at yourself like, well, I'm a failure. I haven't done the things that I wanted to do. And like I said, I wish I would have known this when I was younger. Wetzler tells you to look at your life in decades. So he says in your 20s, do everything, do anything at all that interests you, whether you like it or not. I'm going to try this. I'm going to go to this chamber music concert. I don't know if I like chamber music or not, but I'm going to go. And you find out the things that you like. And the other thing he says in your 20s is fail often. Do things, make mistakes, screw up, do all that kind of stuff, not for the sake of making mistakes, but for the sake of what you learn when you make those mistakes. And then he says in your 30s, find those 2 or 3 things that you absolutely love, that you're passionate about, and dig into those things. And then he says in your 40s, when you're more established financially, you understand how life works, you understand how politics works and things like that. He said, find that one thing and dig into it. And then he says in your 50s and 60s and beyond, he said, you will reap the benefits of what you did in your 20s, in your 30s, and your 40s. And I think that's a much better way of looking at life. Take a decade to, do things, to make mistakes, to find what you're passionate about, to really dig into something, as opposed to, here's a milepost. I'm 28 years old and I'm not where I am. Or maybe I am where I want to be, and things like that. I love the way of looking at life that way, as opposed to those arbitrary mileposts that we put out there for ourselves.
Well, and I always tell my kids, Mom's falling again. I'm just failing. I'm just trying. I get up and fall and pick myself up again. I took off as many of my guests know, I took off and I did the farewell show last December, and I said I wasn't coming back. I took 8 months off, and I was just like, what am I doing? Am I giving up on myself? Or is it getting a little too scary now? And this is what we do, we give up. So I had to really work on myself and realize that what I do every day is scary, but it's a change. And it does affect lives, and it does make a difference, and just come as you are. Like you don't have to be all perfection. I like bloopers. I like saying, I can't say that word. I'm not going to even try and say that word, I'm just upfront. But I think that taking that time off, Terry, and reading the book helped me too, to see are you giving up on yourself, Liz? So
yeah. And don't you think there are people, and I'm sure you've interviewed these people, that my life, that doesn't really matter. It's not making a difference in anybody else's life. And let me tell you a quick story. So I spent 4.5 years on a clinical trial drug where I would go to the hospital for an entire week, Monday through Friday, and be infused with this drug. And it kept my tumors stable until the drug company decided they didn't want to make it anymore. But I remember there was a nurse, a young nurse, about 25 years old, already a nurse, but learning how to do things on the unit when I first met her. And about 6 months later, she was taking care of me by herself. And she came in my room one time and she said, Terry, I got a story I want to tell you, but I'm not sure how to tell it to you. And Liz, I don't know how you'd be. I was like, how do you respond to that? You know,
Yeah.
what do you say to something like that? And I said, well, I hope you decide you want to tell it to me because I think I would enjoy hearing it. For the next couple of hours, she's in and out. Finally comes in, sits down. She's like, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. I had a good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked it over with my family. I was going to get out of nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, then I met you. And I see what you go through. And I had a very violent reaction to this medication that I got all the time. And she's like, it doesn't matter how violent it is. You keep coming back. You keep showing up. And it doesn't matter. We know you're going to be here. And she said, then I went back when I was taking care of you and I went in your file and I read everything that you'd been through. And she said, when I finished reading your story, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that just how I live my life. I wasn't doing anything special. I was just living my life.
Yeah.
Had such a profound impact on this young nurse. So anybody who's listening to us now that, my life doesn't matter. There's nothing special about my life. I can promise you, there are people out there watching how you handle your adversity in life and would give almost everything they have just to walk 5 minutes in your shoes. So don't ever think that your life, what you're going through, I'm not famous, I'm not important, most of us aren't. I've always said, people ask, how do you want to be remembered? I don't. I'm not going to be remembered. 100 years from now, nobody's going to remember I was here. But what I want today are those deep connections with other people, those relationships with other people. There's a psychology professor at the University of Chicago who does this experiment with his students. The idea is you go out and get on a bus, sit down next to somebody, and in 3 questions, you go deep with somebody. So you get on a bus, sit down next to them. Hey, how you doing? I'm fine. How are you? I'm just making this up. Question 2, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a doctor. Question 3, have you always wanted to be a doctor? It doesn't matter what they say. They could say, no, I grew up on a farm and I wanted to be a veterinarian, but X, Y, and Z happened. Or my mother was a doctor, but died of breast cancer when she was 40, and I'm honoring her memory by being a doctor. Whatever they tell you, they're telling you their why, their purpose in life. And social media doesn't allow us to go deep with somebody. We stay on the surface with people. I want those deep connections, those deep relationships with other human beings. I could care less whether I'm remembered 100 years from now. Today is what it's all about, because today's all I got. And so can I have a deep relationship with another human being? That's what's important to me.
And that's what I want with all my guests. And that's why I appreciate my guests staying connected to me, because that's that connection, right? That you're talking about, Terry, is
Right.
Stay connected. Don't just have that 1 hour conversation with somebody and then the next guest, the next guest, the next guest. I see so many podcasts out there that are just building content, but they're not connecting. Stay connected to your guests, because you just don't know how much you're impacting their lives. You're giving them that voice and that time to be seen and heard. And I'm not worried about a legacy either, Terry. It's this moment of having time with you. And losing a couple of my guests this year has really taught me that connection is deeply important, because I can go back on those tea times and I can listen to their voice again. I can listen to their story again, and when you connected with me again, Terry, was like, oh my goodness, yeah, let's do this, And then the book, The 4 Truths and a Lie. I'm all about truth, and everybody knows that. I like truth. I don't care how hard it hurts me. I'd rather the truth than a lie.
Yeah.
So I love the cover and the title of that book, because just that, without even reading inside the book, Terry, you had me.
Super.
Just the title. I was just like, what truth's he going to tell me? Like, what's he going to tell me that I don't know? So let's get to number 3, but you're saying number 3 is actually number 4. So let's get to number 3 and why you put it on number 4. So number 3 is what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And it's kind of what we're talking about right now.
Exactly. And I had 1, 2, and 4, and I just kind of felt that truth 3 is really a legacy truth. It's what are you going to leave behind? And there's a great story. You remember Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers from Mr. Rogers' Neighborhood. So when Mr. Rogers died in 2003, I believe, his family was going through his effects, and they found his wallet. And inside his wallet was a scrap piece of paper on which Mr. Rogers had written 4 simple words: life is for service. And you look at his life, all the television shows he did. He was also a minister. He'd done so much in a philanthropic kind of way to help other people, help other kids, help parents, help all kinds of things like that. And I mean, his whole life was about service. And really that's what 4 Truths and a Lie is about. It's about it's about what you do to make the world a better place. Not how much money you make, not how important you are, not how influential you are. None of that. None of that matters, because none of that goes with you when you die. And we're all going to die sometime. And so, that's why I felt it was so important to, we like things in threes, ABC, Father, Son, Holy Spirit, 1, 2, 3. We like things in threes. And I was really hesitant to make it 4 truths. I mean, it's like, it was like, well, you should make it three truths, because 3 is what people like. And I was like, yeah, you're probably right. But I just felt it was so important to think about the legacy, to think about where we end up. And, when I had my leg amputated back in 2020 and found out I had tumors in my lungs. And so I went with my wife to the mortuary, to the cemetery, and to the church, and I planned my funeral. And because I go on podcasts like this and speak in person, about motivation and the need to keep moving forward, I actually got some pushback from people who commented that planning my funeral was in some way defeatist. And I kind of had to remind these folks, the last time I checked, I think we're all going to die. I don't think anybody's working on a cure for life right now.
Yeah.
Every one of us is going to die, but not every one of us is truly going to live. And I heard a Native American Blackfoot proverb years ago that I absolutely love. And it goes like this. It says, when you were born, you cried and the world rejoiced. Live your life in such a way so that when you die, the world cries and you rejoice. That's what I want. That's what I'm looking for.
Wow. And it's so true. Everyone says, I'm living. But are we actually living, Terry? Wow.
Yeah, that's a question we should ask ourselves every day. That's a question. When I got cancer, and I've talked to other people who have cancer, and it seemed, the answer seems relatively simple. Do you want to live? And, well, of course we want to live. I can promise you, I've met people that they don't really want to live. They don't want to go through the pain, the difficult, the horror, the ugliness of what it takes to fight through a disease or something like that. You don't really want to put the effort in. And so I think that's an important question to ask ourselves every day. Do you want to live? And like I said, it seems that the answer seems simple. Yes, I want to live. But a lot of people, if they really are honest with themselves, don't answer yes to that question.
It's being honest with ourselves, right? Yeah. Getting down to the real and raw, and just looking yourself and saying, do you want to live? Yeah. I know I got to that point, Terry. It got dark and I was just like, I'm done. I don't want to even open those eyes anymore. I'm just done. And it's not because I want attention or anything like that. It's just the pain. The pain gets so heavy sometimes that it's done. You have no fight left in you. And that's what I had to look at, was that darkness. Was I really giving up on myself? Was I really giving up on everything? And I had to snap out of it. And the only thing that snapped me out of it was coming back to podcasting, because I knew that I would meet people like you, Terry. I would meet people who would give me the strength to get through those hard days, to give me something, that wisdom of hope to stay strong. Yeah. And that's what my podcast has done. It's not about all the numbers. It's not about all the views, all the downloads. It's about the connection, the human connection of one-on-one, and sometimes two-on-two, making friends that I would have never met had I not put myself in the light and say, let's serve tea.
Yeah.
It was never about a beverage. It was about the connection. It was always about the connection. You know, and my children know this and understand that now, that it was never about fame for mom. It was about connection.
Yeah.
You know, so let's get into the portrait and then let's get into the lie. And then we had some questions coming in and we have some lightning bolt questions here. Let's, you know, let's have some fun together, Terry. And
I'm
then
having fun. Are you not having fun, Liz?
we are having fun because you know what? It is so nice to see that you are here, Terry, knowing the struggles and the challenges you've went through. I've lost 9 guests this year. So I'm glad to see you because you're not number 10. So thanks
I
for
came
showing
close
up
to being
today.
number 10, let me tell you.
So the truth of number 4 is as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And that's what I'm talking about, right? Is I almost quit.
Yeah. And you know, and there's a difference between quitting and taking a break. You know, we all need some time, some downtime, some, you know what? I need to get away from this from a little while and just kind of recharge, you know, recharge the batteries and see where it takes me when I go back to it and things like that. And you know, I think this is pretty self-explanatory. As long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And I guess the way I look at it, you know, someday my pain is going to end. It may end through surgery, it may end through some new therapy. Quite frankly, it may end when I die. But if I quit, if I give in, if I let pain take over, then pain will always be a part of my life. And I don't look at the pain. I mean, I've been through quite a bit of pain, but I don't look at that pain as something necessarily that's bad. I look at that pain as how can I grow from that pain? What is that? I don't think anybody suffers in vain. I don't think there's, you know, when bad things happen to us, they just happen. There's a reason they happen. We're supposed to learn a lesson. We're supposed to find meaning in our misery. And I don't think people look at it like that. They're like, "Oh, I'm in pain, and you know, this is terrible, and woe is me, and you know, feel sorry for me, and all that kind of stuff." I look at it more as I'm supposed to learn something here. What am I supposed to learn? What's the unique thing that I'm supposed to take away from this? Somebody else may take something else away, but what am I supposed to learn from going through this? And it took me a long time to come to that realization that there was a reason, you know, that we just don't suffer in vain. People just don't go out and have bad things happen to them. You're supposed to learn something, maybe something about yourself, maybe something about somebody else, but always ask yourself, what am I supposed to learn from whatever difficulty, misery, hardship you're going through? What are you supposed to learn from that? And I think that's the fourth truth.
And I say it all the time, right? Pain is my teacher.
Mm-hmm.
If we're really being honest with ourselves, pain is our teacher.
Yeah.
Failure is our teacher. You know, everyone's looking at it as a negative, as a weakness. It's not. That's where the strength is.
Yes. Yeah. That's where true strength comes from. And people don't, because it hurts. It's uncomfortable. We don't like things that are uncomfortable. I mean, again, it goes back to our brain kind of coming full circle here, you know, controlling your mind. You know, yeah, this hurts. It's uncomfortable. Stop it. Knock it off. Don't do it. Well, how am I going to grow then? You know, and so, pardon me.
Yeah.
So what am I supposed to learn from this? Not this is uncomfortable. Why am I doing this?
And I want to get into the lie with you. The lie is your worth is determined by what you have or who you are. Why is that a lie?
Because it's not. It's not. That's not how you should look at your life. I mean, like I said, don't get me wrong. You know, my first book was about success. My second book was about significance. I don't think those are mutually exclusive. I think you can be successful and significant in people's lives. There's a great fable. I don't think this ever actually happened, but it's a great story. It's about Alexander the Great, who probably was, you know, everybody talks about how Hitler was terrible and killed, you know, 6 million Jews and all that kind of thing. Alexander the Great probably killed more people than Hitler did. In his, he basically conquered the entire known world. And supposedly the story goes that as Alexander the Great is dying, he calls his counselors together And he says, I want you to carry out my final 3 wishes. They're like, okay, what are your final 3 wishes? He said, number 1, I want only my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave. Number 2, I want the road to the cemetery paved with gold and silver and precious stones. And number 3, I want my hands to be outside my coffin. One of his counselors steps forward and it's like, all right, you're Alexander the Great. You're the most powerful man in the world. And these are your final 3 wishes. Why do you want these to be your final 3 wishes? And he said, well, number 1, he said, I want my doctors to carry my coffin to the grave because I want people to understand that no doctor cures anything. They only help the body. They help you to cure yourself. So I want people to understand that they need to take care of their bodies. They need, to exercise, to eat right, to get enough rest, to reduce stress, all the things we know how to stay healthy. I want people to understand that by having only my doctors carry my coffin to the grave. He said, secondly, I spent my entire life, and this kind of ties in to the lie, accumulating wealth and fortune and conquering all territories and having all kinds of slaves and concubines and everything like that. And yet none of that is coming with me beyond the grave. So I want people to understand that it's just folly to chase wealth and power and influence because it doesn't go with you after the grave. The only thing that does go with you is love. And he said, secondly, I want my hands, or thirdly, I want my hands hanging outside my casket because I want people to understand that I came into this world empty-handed and I leave it pretty much the same way. And I think that's a great story that illustrates what the lie is. It's not about what you get. It's about what you give. It goes back to the Fred Rogers quote, life is for service. What can you give to other people? How can you make a difference in other people's lives? And as I said, and don't get me wrong, I mean, I have bad days. When I have therapy, I cry, I get down, I feel sorry for myself. But when I'm doing that, I'm looking inward. I'm looking at, oh, whoa, this is bad. This is terrible. I don't feel good, et cetera, et cetera. And I find a real simple way to kind of flip that is to reach out to another human being. Whether I'm sitting in the waiting room, at the infusion center waiting to get treated, and somebody comes in and they're a newbie, that their first time there, they've got that deer in headlights look, they're scared, they're worried, there's all kinds of things going on in their brain. And for me to just wheel up in my wheelchair and say, hi, I'm Terry, what's your name? And then to make that connection, it's like, hey, these are the greatest nurses. They're going to take care of you. You're going to be fine. Everything's going to work out. And all of a sudden they change because they go from being seen as a cancer patient to being seen as Bob or Tom or Sally or Harry or whoever they are. They're seen as a human being. And we tend to isolate. And I think disease in and of itself, first it isolates us from our friends, then it isolates us from our family. And if it goes long enough, it isolates us from ourselves, from who we really are. And when you have that isolation, sorry, my nose is running. When you have that isolation, you're by yourself. We're not good by ourselves. We're better together. If COVID taught us anything, it's how much better we are together than we are separately. I mean, when we were isolated, divorce rates went up. Domestic violence rates went up. Drug abuse rates went up. Alcohol abuse rates went up. We're not good together. We're not good by ourselves. We are so much better together. So get involved with other people. It'll make you feel better no matter how bad you're feeling.
Absolutely. And I've said this many of times, COVID had its pros and cons, right? And the pros were we connected through the virtual LAN. And we stayed connected. Some of us did, but some of us went back to our old ways. So it kind of showed me, did they really want change, or did they, did they actually listen to the lesson of the pain of COVID? Because COVID was a painful time for a lot of people.
Yes, it was.
And it was a teacher. It taught us that isolation was not good for us. Just like you said, right? And I find that now that COVID is gone, people are scared to get out because they were locked in. They don't know how to cope. I've said this many a times. The people that were successful during COVID was people that were in prison because they were locked in already. They were isolated already. They survived that. They lived that in a daily life, right? But us as humans who are free to come and go, it took a lot out of us. Mental health rates went up, suicide rates went up. Like you said, domestic violence went up. You know, it was a scary time. But what did we actually learn from it? Did we actually change from it, or did we make a difference from it? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I do. And I think, people that thought about it and did things, like the National Basketball Association shut down for a month, and players ended up ponying up their own money for all those people in the stadiums who weren't working because there were no games, for the vendors and for the ushers and for all those people. They gave of their own personal money so that those people would be taken care of. There were those things that you'd see on the news, where people would go out on their balcony and play their piano or their violin or their guitar or their trumpet or whatever, so other people could listen to music and things that, so we got creative on how we stayed connected.
Yeah.
And you're right. Some people, went right back to their old ways, when COVID was over. But it also led us to be creative about how we stayed connected with each other. And I think that was the thing that I took away, that the hope didn't die. We didn't just go into our homes or our apartments and say, I'll be here until this is done. No, we figured out a way to get around what the government was telling us we had or could or couldn't do, because that was important. Those connections with other human beings, those were important. Those weren't something that the government can take away from it. And how are we going to do that? And I think it's true today. It goes back to the discussion of, getting on a bus and going deep with somebody in 3 questions. It's those relationships. It's just asking questions of, and I used to do this. I used to drive my wife crazy. My wife was in the financial services industry, and we would go to the obligatory holiday party, every year. And I'd be like, all right, I'm going to go in. So I'm going to find 5 of your colleagues. And at the end of the night, I'm going to come out. I'm going to tell you, how they met their spouse, how many kids they have, where they went to school, how they got this job, everything. I said, but not only that, Monday morning when you go to work, they're going to come to you and tell you what a great guy that I am, but they're not going to know anything about me. I mean, if you want to be a great conversationalist, just ask people about themselves and be quiet. We're narcissistic. We love talking about ourselves. So, I would go into these parties and I would, how did you meet your wife? Where did you meet your wife? Where did you go to school? Why did you go to school? What made you do that? All those how and what questions and things like that. And I would come out and I would tell my wife, about these people, but they would never reciprocate. They would never, oh, how did you meet your wife? Where did you go to school? How did you get that? Rarely would anybody ask me a question about myself. And it got to be a joke, because it was every Christmas, every holiday, we would go and I would do the same thing. I'd find 5 different people and it would be the same scenario and things like that. But I'm a genuinely curious person. That was one thing we were taught as hostage negotiators. Be curious. Be curious about what's going on. Use your curious voice. Oh, you don't think you can do that? That's a way to, somebody says something to you. That's a way to put the ball back into their court. Oh, you don't think you can do that? And then go silent. Don't say anything, because they'll pick up the conversation and they'll give you more information. I mean, it works as a hostage negotiator. It works when you're negotiating. You're buying a new car. You're in your business and you want to take over another company or buy another company. Get people to talk. You will get more information. The more they talk, the more information they get. And you do that by asking them questions and giving that, oh, that's not something you can do. Are you the one in charge of this? And then go silent. Silence is one of the biggest things we can use to learn about other people, to get more information. We don't like silence as human beings. We want to fill the silence. People fill it with information. Take the information in, see what happens.
I think I'm just a curious nerd. I just want to know what makes other people tick.
Exactly. Yeah. Why did so and so make that decision? I read Harry Truman's biography by David McCullough, and it was like, what were you thinking the morning that the atomic bomb was dropped? I mean, Truman was a very religious person. He wanted to do the right thing. He was on the ticket because he could get the Midwest vote. Nobody thought Roosevelt would die. Truman was going to be a nobody vice president, and all of a sudden, he's the president, and he's got to make the most scariest, most devastating decision to drop these two bombs and wipe out tens of thousands of people. And for a very religious man, I mean, I'm sure he lost a lot of sleep before he made that decision.
Absolutely. What I really loved about the book, Terry, when you sent it to me, and I got it on my Kindle so I can read it at any time.
There you go.
I can go back and read it as many times as I want. I like the end notes. You gave a lot of good end notes. So I want to talk about the end notes because we're coming to the end of Tea Time. Why did you feel it was important to put that at the end of the book?
Because I love to read. I like I said, I'm a curious person, and so I accumulate all this information. I have these notebooks here, and I mean, this notebook is just literally filled with stories, notes, things that I've learned, I've accumulated, and I drew a lot from that notebook, and so it was. I didn't, first of all, a lot of this came from other people, and so I didn't want to say, "Hey, this was mine." I wanted to be honest and say, no, this came from this person. But then I took it and said, here's how I applied it in my life. Here's how I did what, I thought was important based on that information and things like that. And I wanted people to be able, if they read something, it's like, well, where did that come from? Okay, that came from here. Now I can go there and I can look at that and I can interpret how I feel it's important in my life. Because, Liz, you and I are going to read something and you're going to put a spin on it one way and I'm going to put a spin on it a different way just because of who we are, how we were raised and things like that. So I wanted people to be able to go and learn more. And so here's a site, go to that site and look at it. And I bet on that site, you're going to find even more sites that you can go to and look at it. So I felt it was important because I have no end notes in sustainable excellence. It's more stories from my life. And these were things that I'd read about, I'd heard on a podcast or something like that, and I dug into and wanted to learn about it. So it was, where did that come from so that other people could learn as well?
Definition of truth, because I'm a truth seeker. Mm-hmm. So we really got to start understanding words. We use a lot of words that we do not understand or have the concept of those words. I'm big on this with my kids when they say the word trust and friends, and really look at those words before putting those titles to certain things in life. And that's what I got from this book was the word truth, being upfront and being raw and open with yourself and getting really deep, right? And the lie, I was just like, oh, there's always a lie in the world. Someone's lying out there about something, right? So I kind of really like just the cover and the title, Terry. So thank you for bringing that book to my attention and to come and share it with the audience today. Terry, do you have another book on the go or any new things coming up that you'd like to share?
I've just come off a really nasty treatment. You can tell I've lost my hair and things like that. I'm at the point right now. I wanted to put the book out. I did put the book out before I went in the hospital for a 3-week stay and stuff like that. So right now I'm just trying to heal and kind of get my energy back. I'm still anemic and things like that. So I don't know. I'll never say never, but I don't know. I kind of want to take up the more speaking, I've been on hundreds of podcasts, but more speaking with audiences, more getting out there with people and I find when I speak in front of audiences, you kind of get the energy from the audience and things like that. And you can joke around and have fun and things like that. So I'm kind of looking to do more speaking, but I'll never say never with a book. I mean, I never thought I would write a book in my entire life. My mom kept telling me, you should write a book, you should write a book, you should write a book. And then when I wrote the book, she was like, you wrote a book? I mean, it was kind of.
You told me to, Mom.
Yeah, really. Like, well, thanks for believing in me, Mom. You were telling me to do it, so I did it. And then, so I never expected, to write a book, and I've never cared about how many books I sold. That was never. They always say, if you want to get rich or you want to get famous, don't write a book, because those two things aren't going to happen. But it was fun because I learned, and I'll never forget the first time, my editor was like, I gave you that Nelson Mandela quote about, and there's like, he didn't say that. I'm like, what? Yes, he did. I talk about it all the time on podcasts. No, he never said that. It's attributed to him, but he never said that. I was like, wow. It kind of hit me right between the eyes. It was like, I'm thinking I've got this great quote, from this world leader. And it's like, he never said that. It's attributed to him, but he never said that. Like, okay, well, I guess we got a lot of work to do in editing this book. So.
Well, it kind of gives all the listeners out there, right? Don't believe what you hear.
Exactly. I mean, test it. Is it true? Did it really come from that person? Go find it. And if it did, okay. If it didn't, then why is it attributed to this person, who never said it? Find that out. I mean, you're right. Don't take what you hear on a podcast. Don't take what you hear, on the news or television or social media as gospel. Go make sure that it's true before you start using it.
Yeah. Well, I always do my homework after a tea time because you guys teach me so much. One tea time guest taught and was speaking about Beetlejuice, and I was thinking the movie Beetlejuice, and I was like, he was talking about the stars, and I was like, so at 2 a.m, I'm yelling at my phone. Why did I not learn this in school? Like, this is so gorgeous. This is so pretty.
Yeah.
I learned so much from each episode and each guest. And Terry, I'm glad that you're here today, and I hope you're feeling better and you get through this. Because I want to see you next year and I want to see you the year after. So, let's stay connected in that. If anybody would like to reach out to you or know more about the books, where can they find that, Terry?
Yeah, I mean, Four Truths and Lies is available anywhere you can get a book online. I mean, Amazon's probably the easiest. Best way to reach out to me is go to my website, motivationalcheck.com. Leave me a message. I love hearing from people. I mean, read the book, tell me you hate it. That's fine. Not everybody's going to like everything, so tell me you love it. Tell me why you love it, and things like that. So, motivationalcheck.com will get you to me.
Awesome. So any final words you have for the listeners today?
Like I said, I'm a big reader. I love to read. And, when I was in high school, I read a book by Ernest Hemingway called Farewell to Arms, which is kind of a semi-autobiographical account of his time as an ambulance driver for the Italian army during World War I. And there's a line in the book that I absolutely love. I think about it almost every day. And the line is this: life breaks everyone, and afterward, many are stronger at the broken places. So I think about that, like if you were to break your arm and, a doctor would set it, put it in a cast, and it would heal. When that arm heals, where that break was, that part of your arm will be stronger than the rest of your arm. That's a metaphor for life. When bad things happen to us, when they beat us to our knees, when they break us, if you can keep moving forward, if you can push through that, you will come out the other end a stronger and more determined individual. It's been proven. I've done it in my life. I've read about people who've done it. So, I mean, when those bad things happen, don't think, woe is me. Think, what can I learn? And how am I going to be a stronger person when I get through this?
Well, thank you so much, Terry. I really enjoyed seeing you, more than you realize. So thank you for being here today. I'm just going to do a closing summary of what we did today on Tea Time. And I'll see everybody back at 7 p.m. with another story on World Kindness Day. And it's nice that it's World Kindness Day and I get to have a kind conversation with a past guest. What an empowering tea time this has been with Terry Tucker. Every time Terry joins us, he leaves a lasting imprint. A reminder that the battle we face aren't here to break us, but to build the spirit within us. He taught us that real strength isn't loud, it's steady. It's the quiet choice to keep showing up when life tests you the hardest. So this afternoon, as you reflect on this tea time, ask yourself, am I living with purpose or am I just passing through my days? Because as Terry reminded us, meaning is found in the moments we choose to keep fighting for the life we're meant to live. Thank you, Terry, for pouring another cup of resilience, truth, and heart into this space. Your courage continues to serve as a light for all of us.
Thank you, Liz.